I was only 21 years old in October 2013. I worked from 3 p.m. to about 11 p.m. every workday. When our shifts were over and it was time to go home, I saw a trend among my coworkers. As we all left the parking lot, most of us would turn right and go one way. But there were only a few of us who always turned left, maybe 2 or 3. It was a small but obvious change in how we did things every day. That night, the 2 coworkers who usually went left with me had already left before I did. When I left the parking lot, I was by myself. When I was stopped at the first light after a while, I saw an SUV pull up behind me and stop. There was an extra lane available, but there were only 2 of us going this way on the 2-lane road. It just seemed wrong. I didn't really think about it, though. I drove normally when the light turned green, but the SUV stayed behind me the whole time. In the left lane, I was going about 70 miles per hour. I was going to spend some time at my folks' house since I had to go by it on my way home. The SUV was always there, facing the same way, every time I looked in my rearview mirror. I moved over to the right lane and slowed down a bit to make room for the SUV. At that time, I wasn't scared. I was just annoyed by seeing its headlights in my mirror all the time. The SUV did the same thing when I moved over and slowed down to 65 miles per hour. I thought, this guy is acting weird at that point. I chose not to go see my parents after all and instead went straight home. I moved into the fast lane when I got on the road and was going about 85 to 90 miles per hour. Also, guess what? The SUV that was following me was still there. It stayed in the same lane every time I changed lanes. The SUV sped up when I did. It did the same thing when I slowed down. The exit to my neighborhood was nice, but I didn't feel safe going straight to my apartment building. I drove right by it and went to a gas stop instead. When I pulled up to a gas pump, that same SUV pulled up right behind me. 2 guys in ski masks were in the truck when I looked in the mirror. 2 homeless guys at the gas station came up to my car and asked if I had any extra money. I believe these 2 men really saved me because the SUV slowly drove away as soon as they got close to my car. When they got out of the gas station, they slowed down. I didn't leave until they were a little farther down the street. I was shocked to see that they were watching me. As soon as I pulled away from the gas station, they turned around in the middle of the street and came back toward me. But this time I was able to get rid of them. I haven't seen that truck since, but I really want to thank those poor guys because I think they saved my life. It happened in 2014 when I was around 12 years old. It was summer break and it was around 11 o'clock at night when my mom came into the living room where I was relaxing and told me if I wanted to go with her to pay our water bill. I really like going out at night, especially for random drives, so I said yes to my mom's invitation. We all got into the car and started driving toward the water tower. It was really dark outside, except for the light from the moon on the road. My mom, my sister, and I were chatting and having a good time until we got to the water tower. Just to let you know, I get really scared in the dark. I'm terrified of it, especially around where I live, because it gets so dark out here at night, and there aren't many streetlights. Anyway, we arrived at the water tower. As soon as I opened my door and got out, I heard strange noises coming from the direction of the tower. Right away, I told my mom about what I was hearing, but she thought I was joking or just scared of the dark. My mom knows me really well. I still got out of the truck, but I did it slowly. Then I went to the door to put the envelope in. I hurried back to the truck as fast as I could. My mom was laughing at me while she drove away from the water district. We were driving onto the highway when suddenly a huge shadow flew right in front of our truck. It was gigantic, about 8 feet tall, with wings that stretched about 10 feet wide. I mean, it was really big. I saw it for just a moment, but it looked gray and had a body shaped like a person, which made it even scarier. We saw the silhouette fly back up to the tower and then come back down. The flying thing was moving slowly and near to the ground. We couldn't believe what we were seeing. It felt like everything around us paused for a moment. We couldn't believe such a creature could exist. Suddenly, my mom and I started screaming, and she pushed the gas pedal as hard as she could. Then she told me to look behind to make sure that thing wasn't following us. My sister didn't see it because she was on her phone, but she heard us screaming and started getting scared too. When we got home and parked, we all rushed inside as fast as we could. But I couldn't sleep at all that night, and I even cried a little. I learned that there's a conservation area out there, and that's probably where the creature lives. About a year later, I watched an episode of Monsters and Mysteries in America, and it talked about flying human-like creatures. I started to cry when I saw it because the stories matched what we saw almost perfectly. I went to tell my mom about it. The sighting happened in the Ozarks in Missouri. Just so you know, the Ozarks are about 4 hours away from where I live. The men on the show described exactly what we saw: the gray color of the creature, its height, wingspan, humanoid shape, and how it flew in front of their car after descending from a great height. I'm sure not many people believe us, but that's okay. Whether someone believes the story or not doesn't change the fact that this creature is real. I was taking my grandmother from Nebraska back to her house. Our route was Highway 45, which led us south. Everything looked fine, really just driving easily, not a turn. There are no other roads. Keep going straight on Highway 45. Then all of a sudden, we found ourselves in this small town. It was not possible to turn off. We only had to take one big road to get to the end of town. Then we saw this strange, big, gray and black building that looked like a church or town hall. There weren't many cars around, but the ones we did see were very different. It looked like it was built in the 1950s, but some of its parts were from the 1980s. It was clear that something wasn't right as soon as we got to the small town. My grandmother became very worried. There was something off about the town. Someone drew what they thought a town should look like. It would be like asking an artist to draw an American small town they had never seen. It all seemed strange and not real. It looked like the road was going nowhere because it never turned. We were going south on Highway 45 one minute, then all of a sudden, the trees around us got so thick that we couldn't see. Following that, we drove slowly along the main street of this small town. That night we didn't see anyone. Now that I think about it, that was probably a good thing. I think I didn't want to meet the people who lived in that town. A huge building stood at the end of the street. It looked like the most important building there. A black roof and gray walls made up the building. I knew something very strange was going on when I saw it. One-way roads like Highway 45 don't end there. In fact, most roads don't end at a town in the middle of nowhere. One road cut right through the middle. It would look like everything was fine if you were going fast, but you'd be just as scared as I was if you stopped and looked closely. The windows in the buildings were strange. It didn't make sense that they were between the floors. People couldn't even get a good look out of the windows. There were shops that didn't have doors or signs, and there were no other ways to get in or out. It really looked like what someone might think a small town would be like. And those trees I already talked about. Remember how thick the forest was when we first got here? Well, there were so many trees that some of them hit and scratched my car. It looked like no cars had ever been through this area before. My grandmother, who was sitting next to me, was very scared. It was clear that she was scared even though she didn't say anything. At that point, she was shaking and told us we had to leave. I feel really lucky to have been there with her. If I had been in the car by myself, I would have been too interested to wait. It looked like we got lost in a place that people weren't supposed to be and eyes weren't supposed to see. It looked like there was a cover over what was there. It's possible that they put this fake town there in case someone who wasn't meant to be there did. Grandma, thank you for likely saving my life. I really would have liked to check that place out. If she wasn't with me, I know. I would have just left the car parked and walked out. But instead, I turned the car around in a small spot and drove back up the street the way we came. Being honest, seeing that town made me feel so strange that I didn't think it would let us leave, if that makes sense. The strange building started to go away, though, as we went back into the thick forest. We were glad when we got back to normal roads after driving for a while. We were going to the wrong place now that we were going north on Highway 45. I turned around and reluctantly went back toward town. In my rearview mirror, I could see that the town was slowly going away, and the highway was back to being a general highway. We went back to the spot where we were, but there was no town there anymore. We both knew that something very strange had just happened because Grandma was still shaking. I was never able to find that town again. I couldn't find it on any maps, and I have no idea what it's called. I'm pretty sure Mississippi doesn't have any towns like that. When you drive at night, be careful, because something that looks like a town could disappear. I'm a 21-year-old female, and this story happened when I just turned 18. I got a job at CVS, which was about 20 minutes away from my home. It was in the summer, right before I started college. The job was fine. It paid better than other places like grocery stores or fast food restaurants nearby. But I always had to work the night shift because I was the youngest and newest worker, even though I didn't really mind. Nights were quiet after the pharmacy closed, so I mostly played on my phone to pass the time. But the night this happened wasn't like the usual nights at the store. The pharmacy workers had to stay longer that night until about 9 p.m. to finish their work. Then around 8:30 p.m., a man came into the store. Just by looking at him, I could tell something wasn't right. He was a big guy and he looked dirty and greasy. I greeted him like usual, but he just stared at me for a few seconds before heading toward the pharmacy. At 9 p.m., when it was time for the pharmacy workers to leave, the man wasn't around. "Guy who came in? What guy?" the tech replied before leaving with her stuff. Oh no, maybe he's still in the store somewhere, I thought to myself. I walked through the aisles looking for him, but he wasn't there. Just as I was about to turn into the hallway for the bathroom, I saw him. He was standing in the dark hallway. "What time do you—" he mumbled at me, staring straight at me as he spoke. It took me a moment to realize he had said something as he just stood there silently. Just as I was about to reply, I smelled something awful. It was like a mix of body odor and rot, and I had to keep myself from gagging. 9. He said nothing and simply passed by me, and the smell went with him as he walked out of the store. I checked the bathrooms, which were thankfully clean. The man happened to be parked right next to me outside. My manager walked with me to my car, but the man was standing by his car in the dark parking lot. I got into my car and he got into his. While driving, I thought it was just a coincidence that he was behind me. I figured he'd turn onto some other street soon, but I was wrong. Even as I got close to my neighborhood, he was still right behind me. I knew I had to do something quick, so I decided to take a longer route home instead. Once I felt safe, I raced through the streets, nearly flying a few times as I hurried home. That night, I parked my car in the garage so he couldn't see it from the street. But strangely, nobody drove down my street that night, and thankfully I never saw the man again. This took place during my first year of high school. The air was cold at night because it was the end of winter. Veronica, my friend, sent me a message asking what I was up to. To help you understand the story better, let me describe the map and how far away each spot was. I was at my cousin's house at the time, which was about 8 blocks away. McDonald's was about a half-mile away from both of our homes. There was a Target and a few other fast food places across the street from our McDonald's. An A&W was about a mile and a half away. As for who had the bright idea to sneak out at 11 p.m. to get food, I can't say for sure, but we did it anyway. I found it pretty easy to sneak out, even though I had never done it before. Veronica, on the other hand, knew a lot about this. I was still in my pajamas, shorts, and a big football shirt because it was late. You might not have wanted to wear that to sneak out at 11 p.m., especially in a place that isn't very safe. In the center, we met and walked to McDonald's, where we talked about boy drama and how bad our math teacher was. Not every street was empty, but not many cars were around either. I was afraid that my mom would see me if she came by at 11 p.m. We picked the big Target parking lot as our route. In order to get to McDonald's and Target, you had to walk a bit uphill from west to east. But since we were going from south to north, it didn't bother us. It wouldn't have made a difference either way. But it's good to say. We saw a man as we crossed the street from Target to McDonald's. He was probably about 5'5". He wore a blue hoodie and shorts. At the time, Veronica was around 5'2", and I was about 5'4". This all happened years ago, so some details are a bit fuzzy. I didn't pay much attention to the guy because Veronica and I were busy laughing and chatting about everything. But I did remember him in my head. We weren't exactly the smartest duo. I was talking non-stop while Veronica kept looking back over her shoulder. She always does that whenever we walk anywhere, no matter what time it is. Then she hooked her arm around mine and whispered softly that the guy was following us. I glanced behind me, trying not to make it obvious. We had a weird sense of humor, so it wouldn't have been too surprising if she was joking. But sadly, she wasn't. She began walking faster, so I squeezed her arm tighter and told her not to rush, or the guy would figure out we noticed him. Like I said before, our city wasn't the safest, so I was raised to always pay attention to what was going on around me. I wasn't as savvy about the streets as my siblings. I was more into books than anything else, but I wasn't completely clueless either. I suggested to Veronica that we should just go into Target. While crossing the street, I looked back and saw that the guy was also crossing. Veronica was getting really scared by now. And me? What about me, you might ask? I was laughing. I found it funny because what were the chances that the first time I sneak out I'd end up being followed from a McDonald's? But, I have to admit, I ended up sneaking out again after that. I guess I just wanted to have the full high school experience. While we walked through the big Target parking lot, I FaceTimed my cousin to tell her what was going on. While I was laughing and talking, Veronica was basically freaking out. Eventually, I hung up suddenly because Veronica and I agreed to sprint through the rest of the parking lot and rush into Target. Once we got inside Target, we decided to walk around just in case he followed us in, but thankfully he didn't. We went back to the glass windows by the entrance and sat down to figure out what to do. Veronica said she saw the guy walking past Target in the same direction we had come from. Behind Target is a park, which I always use to get home. This time I decided to call my older brother for help, but he told me to call my cousin and ask her to come meet us at Target. I messaged her and told her to bring her big boyfriend who was staying over. She said she would meet us at the front. Veronica felt a lot better, but I wasn't really bothered by it. A guy walked into Target and came over to Veronica and me. I don't remember exactly, but I think he was maybe around 5'7". He said he was in the McDonald's drive-thru when he saw us walking away and noticed the guy following us. He said he saw us go into Target as well as the guy and he wanted to make sure we were safe. We told him what happened and then we assured him that we were fine. We told him our family was on the way and we thanked him. My cousin came with her boyfriend and dad in the car, so yeah, we got caught. But I didn't get in trouble because they were my cousins and I was sort of a good kid. Plus, my mom would have been really upset with my cousins for not noticing. Veronica came with me to my cousin's house where we just talked about what happened. I even FaceTimed one of our older friends and told him about it too. Knowing that someone else saw it made it hit home for me. I've been followed a few more times since then and it's given me serious anxiety. I'm definitely not going to walk alone anymore.